Creepy Hotel Guest by U/Known Explorer 2610. I was working as a hotel maid in my late teens. I would go around and clean rooms that the guests had just left, and then start cleaning rooms of those guests who were staying 2 or more nights. Usually, clean their bathrooms, bring in fresh towels, empty trash, and sometimes vacuum. So, we had this one man who was at this point a regular. He would stay at the hotel for 5 to 6 weeks at a time. He would almost always be in his room. Nobody knew what he was ever up to, but he always looked shabby, looked like he never had enough sleep, and his room had this lingering heavy smell, reeking of alcohol and smoke, but usually the mixture of both. But I had not seen him smoke or even cigarettes or alcohol in his room. I got weird vibes from him, so I would always leave the door open if I was in the room, and if he was there with me. I usually would put the trash can against the door and leave it like that until I'm done and gone. So one day, like any other day, I knocked on the door saying, "Housekeeping," and heard him say, "All good, come in." I entered and put the dirty towels in my basket and began cleaning the bathroom. He almost always had lots and lots of trash, which usually included junk food and an inexcusable number of soda bottles. I proceeded to change his bed, which was a double queen's, and he sat in his recliner watching me the entire time. No small talk, nothing. I grew more and more uncomfortable, and he then got up, moved the trash can, and closed the door. I immediately moved from in between the bed and the wall and sheepishly said that I forgot the fresh towels. He was leaning against the wall with one arm at that point and shaking his head. I said, "I need to get you some towels," and kind of pushed him out of the way and ran out of the door as fast as I could. I never cleaned that room again after that incident. Creepy Man at My Hotel, or Human Traffickers by U/K Lovebug. It was my 21st birthday, so 3 of my best girlfriends and I celebrated with a trip to NYC. To give you a background, 2 of my friends, Lana and Molly, didn't get along that well. The third was and is my best friend to this day, Elle. My birthday is in December, so it was excruciatingly cold at the time of the trip, and we were all staying in the same hotel room, though I can't remember the name. One night, I was pretty tired and ended up going back to the hotel a bit earlier. I didn't want to ruin my friends' time, and I was cool with them staying out later and going to a club. I went home to call my then boyfriend at that time and just relax. I also wanted to go back to the hotel because I was honestly emotionally drained. Throughout the day, Lana and Molly had been arguing on and off. Not really about anything huge, but just nitpicking because they presumably have very opposite personalities. I don't like drama, and being caught in the middle was getting annoying, so I really wanted to be by myself. So, I'm back at the hotel talking to my then boyfriend at that time. 20 minutes in, I get a second call coming from Molly. I answer, and she's crying. She was always pretty dramatic, but of course I was concerned, and the conversation went something like this. "Lana is such a bitch. I'm coming back to the hotel to hang with you." "Are you okay? What happened?" "We got into a fight in a cab and I just don't want to deal with her. I'm heading back now." Okay, be safe. When will you be here?
Like 10 minutes. I'm getting in the cab now.
Okay, see you soon. We can talk when you get here, okay? I hang up the phone with my boyfriend and tell him that I'm going to hang out with her. She comes in a few minutes later and tells me about their fight. I can't even really remember what they fought about, most likely because it was petty and stupid. But we talked for a bit and I told her that we should just try to get some rest. It had been a long day and I was over all the drama of that day. So we did. When Elle and Lana came back to the hotel about an hour later, Lana was pissed drunk. She came in stumbling, yelling obscenities at Molly that I couldn't make out, and Molly said something calmly but to oppose her. Lana got really mad and kicked my suitcase really hard into the wall, and this obviously pissed me off. It's one thing to be upset, but to try to damage other people's belongings is definitely not okay. I had had enough and I wanted to leave. One of my other best friends, who wasn't able to come, had a sister who lived in Queens. Her family is like my family, so I texted her telling her the situation and asked if I could come stay with her for the night. She said of course, so I snatched my suitcase and headed towards the elevator. It was slow, so I was waiting there for a few minutes. Moments later, Molly came bursting out of the room.
I'm coming with you.
No, I want to be alone.
I'm sorry we've ruined your birthday. I want to come with you. I don't want to be around Lana right now. She's being a bitch.
Fine, whatever. The elevator opens and we head to the hotel lobby. It was around 2 a.m. at this time, and given that NYC is always bustling, I was surprised to see that there were virtually no hotel guests in the lobby. There was one man at the front desk, and then another hotel staff member standing around. It was really cold outside, so I wanted someone to hail a cab for me. I asked the front desk if he could have someone do it for me, and he called the other man over and asked. The other man was pretty tall, maybe 6 feet at least, not overweight but stockier for sure. He had a very short buzzed haircut and the most piercing blue eyes, but not the kind that are kind, if you get what I mean. They seemed completely off, and I remember thinking that even before he opened his mouth to speak to me.
Where are you going?
He asked, in what was probably a Russian accent. Even his voice seemed cold, like it lacked any warmth or friendliness. I kind of choked on my words.
We're going to Queens.
He paused. He moved in closer to me and his face got up in mine. I'm about 5'4", so he was definitely bending over a bit to get eerily close to me. To put it into perspective how close he was, we could have easily kissed if he moved about an inch closer. And then he asked, "Is it just you two? Alone?" I said, yes. As I tried to move my body backwards a bit to create some distance, he literally stared into my eyes for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 seconds. Then, he just smiled. I remember feeling so creeped out and just kind of frozen. In my gut, I knew something was off, and I looked at my friend, who was obviously uncomfortable as well. It was like she was trying to tell me with her eyes that this man gave her the creeps too. Finally, he backed away from me and said, "Stay right here." He then whipped out his phone and called someone. He was speaking Russian, so I don't know what he said, and the whole time his eyes stayed on me and my friend, and I remember just feeling paralyzed. I was thinking, Do we just run? I kept looking back at the glass doors of the hotel entrance, hoping that by a miracle, a cab would drive by so we could leave. He got off the phone after about a minute, and all he said was, "Someone's coming, don't worry." A few minutes later, another man entered the hotel. He wasn't dressed like a hotel staff member at all, which was my biggest red flag. Then, he started speaking with the man who called in Russian. They kept nodding while speaking to each other, while looking back at each other, and then at my friend and me. The man with the creepy eyes looked at us and said, "He will take you to where you need to go." What? "Go with him, he will take you." Just then, I kid you not, I look back at the doors and I see a cab slowly inching up our street in traffic.
"Oh, it's okay. I see a cab right there. We're just going to take that. Thanks,"
I yelled as I grabbed Molly's hand and began running out of the hotel to get into the cab. And as soon as we get into the cab, we both looked at each other and expressed our fear for what had just happened. We both were really scared of the man and agreed that we thought something was incredibly off about the men and the encounter. The first thing that came to my mind was that maybe they were part of a human trafficking ring. And when I think back to that night, I always thank God for that cab. It came at just the right time, and I'll never know for sure what that man's intentions were. And since then, I've lived in New York, and I've visited again many times. And no hotel staff member has ever offered to personally drive me somewhere. I don't know what would have happened had we gone with that man, but I have a feeling it would have been not where we wanted to go. So, creepy Russian men at my hotel, let's not meet. I was physically assaulted by a man asking for a cigarette while I was having a cigarette at night outside the hotel that I was staying at. By you/kittycat0930. My husband and I treated ourselves to a night at Radisson Blu in downtown Chicago. We don't get to do things like that usually, so it was awesome. The rates were very inexpensive, but there were certain things that you had no access to. For example, room service and the minibar. But we didn't care. And since there wasn't room service, we ordered off Uber Eats. Nothing fancy, just potbellies. I went downstairs and it was around 10 p.m. I was there to wait and smoke a cigarette. To be kind, I went around to the side, but still near the front. There was no one walking around. I got the food, but I decided to finish smoking around the side. Suddenly, a really nicely dressed dude with a camo mask walked up and asked me for a cigarette. Normally, that's not an issue, but he seemed a bit off. I can't explain it. To say, as soon as he asked me, I felt like something was wrong. His voice sounded very odd. When I gave him a cigarette, he got really close. Then, it started to get scary. He asked for some food. I felt bad, but it wasn't possible to give him food. It was just 2 sandwiches. I said I was sorry, but it was for my husband and I. I figured that he'd leave and that I could finish smoking. Instead, he walked up so close that he was against the food bag and I was against the other side, almost pressing the glass. Then he asked for some of the food again, and when I said no, he started getting angry. He wasn't yelling as to not attract attention, I guess. And it continued like that for a few minutes. Then he asked if he could use my lighter. I gave it to him, But then he started in on how I was lying again. He insisted that I could give him food. Then he asked if I worked there, not a specific place, and I just said that I was staying at the hotel. I was already really nervous. He asked where I was staying and I asked why, and he said because there were a lot of hotels in the area. I pointed at the hotel behind me, and I don't know why, I was just really anxious by this point. So this whole interaction so far was scary, and I usually have no issue dealing with people. However, he was getting pushier and angrier, and he then said, "So you're staying here?" And I said yes. During this entire time, he kept saying that I was lying about the food, and he started getting closer and closer to me as I back up. He kept angrily insisting that I could give him food, but didn't want to. And I said no, that I am sorry, that I can't. We were already too close for comfort and safe distances. He was pressing against the bag and I was holding it against my chest, and his face was inches from mine. He then said, "So, you're here with your boyfriend?" I said husband, and I saw him check my hand. I started walking backwards to the back door, which was about 50 feet away. I thought that if I didn't act afraid, it would turn out better. But I was afraid. His cigarette was lit, and he was still holding my lighter. People usually give it back at this point. He continued demanding some of the food, and I felt it was time to be more assertive, so I demanded my lighter back, and he started getting angry at me, saying over and over that I could give him some food. He then gave my lighter back, but then grabbed both of my arms. I started getting terrified and banging on the glass door with my elbow to get the receptionist's attention. But she ignored me. He got pissed and said something, but I was so scared that I wasn't paying attention. I just wanted help. If anyone listening to this knew me, they'd know that I'd never bang on a window yelling help unless that I felt absolutely terrified. I started crying because I was alone on a side street at night and no one could help me. I had no thoughts but to get away, and I wasn't thinking he'd hurt me in a specific way. I just thought danger and run. That's how scared I was. He got angry that I was crying and pulled me closer. Suddenly, something happened that changed everything, and I'm so grateful. My mom called, and I had my earbuds, which he couldn't see because my hood was up on my coat. So I pressed answer and started crying hysterically and almost screaming. "He's trying to attack me! He's trying to attack me!" That really angered him because he tightened his grip for a second, but also startled him, and he let go and I ran to the doors while still crying and shaking. I cried all the way back to my room, and my mom comforted me on the phone and told me not to go outside again. My husband was so comforting and sweet. He just held me, and then he wanted to know everything. I had to say it a few times because I was still crying and I couldn't breathe. Plus, I was talking fast. I saw him again at maybe 1 a.m. I was standing in front of the hotel this time, by those tall ashtray things that they have outside restaurants and hotels. But I wasn't alone though. A security guard was beside me. I went inside and I saw him through the glass where he assaulted me. I don't know if he was waiting for me or what, but it terrified me. That same night, another person asked me for a cigarette, and it was this really nice woman. She thanked me, but she could tell that I was upset, I guess. She asked and I told her, and she sympathized and explained that that's why she carried a very small handgun, which was in her purse. and I'm definitely getting mazed, so this doesn't happen again. Not all guests are welcome. By you/Kitty Cat Has Claws. I have been working for an independent hotel for just over 4 years now. We're the #1 rated hotel in our city, and I'm very proud of it. I mostly work in housekeeping, but have done some time at the front desk as well. I love my job, and I've always said that my bosses are great. Now, being a housekeeper, I've seen some things. I've seen a room where someone snuck in their dog, kitten, a chicken, and we don't allow pets. I once had a room that I was cleaning as a stayover that had tripods set up around the bed, professional camera equipment cases, an adult-sized pacifier on site, and extra-large-sized children's diapers. And the 2 people that were in that room were in their early 20s. I've even had a room once that we had to call the cops on for a raid because we found meth, and they found a lot of drugs and guns in that room. But today is the first time that I've ever actually felt scared to be in a guest room. As I'm working on a room that's already been vacated, a man in the next room over catches me at my supply cart. He's said to be staying for several days and tells me, "You can go ahead and clean my room now. I'm going down for breakfast." Excellent. I love getting my stayovers done early on. It makes things easier for the people working laundry the sooner we get the dirty laundry down to them. So, I pop over into his room, opening it up and propping the door open with a stopper like we always do. The first thing that I notice is that he has around 20 prescription bottles lined up on one of the 2 beds, along with insulin and needles. I'm nosy, I'll admit it, and I wanted to see what he was on. Oddly, it was only 2 different types of medication for all 20 bottles. About 2/3 were diabetes medication, and the rest were cholesterol medication. That's a little weird that he has so many bottles of the same meds, but whatever. I go to make the bed and see that some of the bedding had been stained. And I sigh, knowing that I'll have to change all the bedding now instead of just being able to turn down the sheets and the blanket. So I leave the room, closing it behind me, to go get the linens that I need and then head right back into the room. I prop the door open again and head to set the clean linens on the desk chair when I see out of the corner of my eye 2 notes sitting on the TV armor. It wouldn't mean anything except I caught the word "kill" scrolled on it. I dropped the linens and took a closer look, and what I read on the first note made my blood run cold. "You don't have to forgive her. You just can't kill her. You're here to take my money and alcohol away from you. Get over having to kill her, and you can safely leave." My heart was pounding, and my eyes went to the second note, which had like a to-do list at first glance, but in the end, it made my stomach churn. Spray and wash. Apply for Medicare. Insubordination. The soul is healed by being with children. Bank card follow-up. Inheritance. Savings. Kauai Pop 10,500. Map, Montana. There will be a day of reckoning. Did you tell Mom what I said? How did Bev get my address? It was too much. I quickly snapped pictures of them on my phone so I could show my boss why I would not clean his room. And I left the room quickly, closing it up behind me. As the door closes, I turn and I see the man just 10 feet away from me, coming back to his room. My heart is in my throat, but I manage a smile and tell him, "I need more supplies. I'll be back to your room in a bit." I take off straight for the elevator, having noticed our maintenance man waiting for the slow transport. And in a hushed tone, I tell him what I found. And he sees that I'm shaken and not in a normal state for me. He rides down with me and I go straight to my boss and tell her that for the first time in all these years, I am not comfortable being in a guest room. I show her the pictures, and her face is still and pale. She goes to the front desk and asks our general manager for a minute of her time and brings her into the office to show her. She agreed. This was not a safe situation and took our maintenance man with her to go inform the man that he had 1 hour to get his belongings and leave the hotel, and that he was not welcome back. I spent a few minutes in the laundry room, trying to calm down. Then my boss went back up with me to the floor until the man was officially out of the hotel. I don't know who Bev is, and I don't know who the woman is that he didn't feel he needed to forgive. But man in room 422, let's not meet again. The Time I Got Locked in a Room with an Unsettling Man by u/boyfriend sweaters. When I was 18, I worked at my college's residence building at the front desk, and I think I almost got assaulted or murdered. You be the judge. During the summer, the building operated as a hotel, so 2.5 floors were hotel rooms and half of the 3rd floor were student rooms. The whole building operated with the hotel swipe key system that was pretty outdated, and all the doors were powered by 4 AA batteries. If the batteries died, there was a decently lengthy process to replace them and then reprogram the door. A dark-haired guy came to the front desk from the inside of the building while I was working an overnight shift at around 1 or 2 a.m., and he said he left his key card in his room. I made him a new one and made my first error of the night. Hotel guests could have as many room keys remade as they wanted, well, hypothetically, but students, however, were supposed to be given a temporary key card and charged $2, which was to be returned when theirs is located. I gave him a new key for his room and asked if he was a student or a hotel guest, and he replied, "Student." At this point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was caught up doing administrative duties that I totally forgot. I used to trust people way too easily at this job, but quickly learned not. Later on in the night, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m., he came to the desk again and said that he couldn't get into his room. I asked if he just forgot his key again, and he said no, that the door wasn't working. I asked if the light was coming on when he swiped his card, and he said no. So I figured that the batteries were dead. I told him that I'd have to change the batteries, and I went up to his room with him. He asked me for my name and I told him, but he didn't tell me his. I opened the door manually with a master key and told him that I'd have to prop it open while I worked on the back panel to replace all the batteries. He said, "No, it's okay, I'll close it," and closed and deadbolted the door locked. Really freaking weird, but I tried not to really think about it. I had changed the batteries on plenty of other doors before by this point, and some students were iffy about having their doors propped open and for their room to be on display for anyone walking by. He also had a really thick accent, and I thought he might be an international student since we had a lot of students from other countries where English was not their first language. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought that maybe it was also just a language barrier issue. But at this point though, I really felt like something was wrong, but I tried to ignore it so that I didn't freak him out. While I was trying to focus on fixing the door as quickly as possible, he kept trying to entice me to go further into the room, saying that his bed was broken and that he needed me to take a look at it. There was something underneath it that needed to be fixed and etc. He held out a little gold house key and said, "I have a key, go get it," and threw it under the bed. He said there was a leak under the fridge. He just kept trying to get me down on the ground, throwing random problems at me. Obviously, I told him no, and that I'd send maintenance up in the morning to take a look if anything was broken. I had my back to him, and he asked me if I would take off my glasses. I said, "No, I need them to see." His tone of voice changed, and in the most steady, chilling manner he said, "Ella, it's okay. You can take them off." And from behind me, he reached around and tried to take off my glasses. I swatted his hand away, and trying to remain composure, I said, "No thanks, I need to keep them on." And even though he was creeping me the hell out, I didn't want to be rude to him. I didn't want to get in trouble if he complained about me or risk upsetting him and having him yell at me. I got up to grab something from the door repair kit and undid the door deadbolt and opened it up in the process. He jumped toward the door to close it again and told me to keep it closed. I told him no, and that I had to open it to start reprogramming it from the front. Well, I held the door with my foot and grabbed something from the door repair kit. He started playing with the little wispy hairs at the top of my forehead and trying to touch my shoulder. I swatted him away again and asked him not to touch me and focus on getting the hell out of there. He once again tried getting me to follow him into the bedroom, saying that the bed was broken, and I went as far as the door frame to see if I could spot any actual problem with his bed. This is when I realized that he had nothing in his room. No dishes in the kitchen, no shower curtain in the bathroom, no sheets on the bed. Nothing. This wasn't his room. My brain once again went back to the international student theory, thinking that he had just arrived today and hadn't gotten a chance to buy anything yet. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. I fiddled around with the door for a few more seconds before announcing that it was fixed, and I quickly gathered the door kit and left. And before I had reached the elevator, he came back out without his shoes on to follow me. He tried to get back in to get his shoes and called out, "Ella, the door isn't fixed. You need to come back." I went back and opened the door manually and told him that if the door was broken, I'd have to send up maintenance to fix it in the morning. I knew he was going to follow me to the elevator again, so I closed the door behind me once he went inside, and I ran down the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I checked the computer and saw that that room that he was in was supposed to be empty. It wasn't a student room or a hotel room. I locked myself in our back office and I called campus security. He came down a few minutes later and went behind the desk. I yelled at him to get on the other side and wait, now that I knew that he wasn't a resident. He tore the corner off a slip of a paper that I had sitting on the desk and drew a flower on it, then put it back on top of my papers. When security arrived, he ran back up to the empty room and tried convincing them that he lived there so that he wouldn't have to leave. He kept showing them his key, which had decided to work on the door again somehow. They escorted him back downstairs and came to ask me if he really did live there. Obviously he didn't. That's why I call you guys crying and terrified, right? He kept interjecting to argue that he did live there, but couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security asked him for his student card, and he couldn't produce it, so they told him he would have to leave if he couldn't prove that he lived there. While they were grabbing his information, I listened from the office and could immediately tell he was lying. The phone number he gave was just a bunch of random numbers. The name he gave was prefixed by as if he was trying to think of a name. When they asked him for his address, he just said, across the street. One security guard asked if he lived in the apartments across the street, and he said yes, but couldn't tell them what the building number was. And he said his apartment number was 1200, but I moved into that building a few months later, and apartment 1200 doesn't exist. When security asked what his purpose was to be sneaking into a room, he just kept up the, and saying that he didn't know. They asked, "Were you trying to see a friend? Do you know anybody who lives here? Were you here to hurt somebody?" And he kept fidgeting and saying, "I don't know, no reason, I was just here." At one point, he tried to tell them that he was my friend, at which point I poked my head out of the office to say that I literally had never seen him before that night. He left. We didn't call the police because he didn't actually do anything. But it was still very unsettling. Later on, it dawned on me how he figured out that the room was vacant. One of the housekeepers had been using it as her personal break room. A few days later, a housekeeper came to the desk and told me that they found the door dead-bolted open and the TV on, and a housekeeper inside watching TV. She must have forgotten to close the door when she left for the night, and when the creep let himself into the building, he found it. I never saw him again, and to this day, I have no clue what he was doing there. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still have me the heebie-jeebies. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.